I love that we're starting the show and both of you are taking a deep breath with your eyes closed. And we are getting into a new podcast episode.
We are getting into a new podcast episode. Victoria Moran, welcome back to the Plant Trainers Podcast.
Why, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It is always super to have you on. You were on episode 185 where we talked to you about your journey and we talked to you about what it's like to be PETA's sexiest woman over 50. And then we got more into, cooking and things like that when we had you on 245 with JL. So that has been super amazing. What are you grateful for in your life since those things have happened?
Oh my goodness. I'm grateful that I have this work and that through this difficult time that everybody's going through, and it's so curious because for everybody it's difficult. For some people it's really awful. For me it's only difficult, and so that means that I have extra energy to contribute, and I'm grateful.
That's wonderful. And yeah, everybody has dealt with it differently. And some people have gone through all the emotions, and some people have gone through extremely hard times. Some people, it's just hard because we're not as connected with other people. And we've seen parts of our business and streams of revenue disappear. But so many people have pivoted and thrived through that and lost hundreds of pounds collectively, lost many pounds, I should say, and, started to work out, started to eat better. So there's something to learn in there from everybody. And I think that whether it has been business or whether it has been personal, we've needed to pivot, and it's an important skill. And if we haven't yet picked it up, it's not too late.
Absolutely. And for me, something that helps a lot is to look for the little miracles. And I've actually been criticized for using that word too much. But to me, when something serendipitous happens that absolutely should not have happened, it seems miraculous to me. And I want to share one of those with you because it just happened yesterday. I needed to take my dog to the vet, and he's going to be fine. So that's good. But we had a snowstorm in New York City. And because I'm in New York City, I don't have a car. And so I knew I was going to get a cab because I'm not riding subways right now. And I also knew that when I dropped him at the vet, I would be out because you can't sit and wait in the waiting room. And it happened that we were having a big, sloppy snowstorm. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to have to just be out in the icky, slushy, wet, nasty weather. And just as I was about to leave, the phone rang, and it was a fitness center. And they said, you filled out a card wanting information about what we do. Would you like to come for a tour? It happens that they're a block away from the vet. It also happens that I filled out that card a year and a half ago. They must have just had some time on their hands to go through old cards. And I said, why, yes, I really would like a tour. So I didn't have to wait out in the snow. And when I told my husband about this, he said, of all the gym joints in all the towns in all the world, that one called you. So I live on stuff like that. It's like, yes, this is hard, that's hard, something else is hard. But I didn't have to wait out in the snow because sometimes life just juxtaposes delights.
It really does. And I think that's small, but it's big at the same time. But when we really listen to stories like that and start to dissect our day to find those small little things, like the phone rang right when you finished the meeting and you were able to take the call, and what if the person wouldn't have left a message and it was somebody calling to say hello. Those small little things, the more you look for them, the more you find, and the more peace and the more joy it brings into your life.
It's so true. It's so true. So I just think sometimes life is a process of looking for the magic while dealing with everything else. Just to bravely take on what comes. I've been reminded a lot lately of Dolly Parton, and I'm thinking I need to put her on the list of great spiritual teachers. And somebody today told me this great Dolly Parton story that when they were filming Steel Magnolias, they were getting their makeup and that, and it was really, really hot. We're filming down south somewhere, and Julia Roberts and all the other actors, and we were just like, oh my God, this is so awful. This is so hot. This is so terrible. And Dolly Parton was like, well, I always wanted to be a movie star and have somebody put on my makeup. And if this is what it is, well, then this is what it is. I thought, what a great attitude. I feel like I need one of those bracelets. What would Dolly do?
It's all about perspective, right? And everybody comes at it from a different way of look. And sometimes that makes such a big difference for those small little things.
So,
For sure.
So tell us a little bit about what has changed for you and how your business has shifted and your whole mindset really has shifted since we spoke to you last.
Yes. Well, I was brought into the 21st century a couple of decades late, in that I never wanted my academy, my Main Street Vegan Academy that trains vegan lifestyle coaches and educators, to be an online thing. And I think part of that is because I had taken online courses that were just packaged. They were there, and you'd go in, and it just didn't inspire me. But then along comes Zoom and all these wonderful ways to be interactive in person. So I did put the academy on Zoom, and I thought, well, it will have the same quality, the same amazing information, the same incredible instructors that it's always had. It just won't have the magic of when it was in person in New York City. Well, what completely surprised me is it does have the magic. And so we've done 2 classes on Zoom. Another one is coming up later this month, and then we'll have one in the summer starting in August. And it actually has enabled some things that we couldn't do in person. So for one thing, it's opened up the presenter world, because always before I was drawing on people from New York City, and it is a great place. There are incredible people here, and we have amazing instructors, and some of them moved away, like JL Fields, but she would always fly in to teach for the academy. But now we are able to reach out and have people from all over. And one of the things that we've added is a wonderful workshop from graduates, from people who have taken the Main Street Vegan Academy course in the past. And because we're not geographically bound, we're able to have a wonderful woman from London who has a magazine called Bright Zine, a vegan co-working space, which is now pivoted because of COVID, but just all this great stuff going on. We have a wonderful caterer in Chicago, a vegan cheese shop in Brooklyn, a wonderful vegan lifestyle coach in Washington State. So just to be able to bring all these people together. And it's funny because for me, in my personal life, one of my great joys is getting people together. I should probably have been a matchmaker. Maybe I was in a past life, but I always want to connect people, and I love having, parties and dinners. And of course, we're not doing that now, but it's this other kind of connecting that's possible and working really well. And I think so many people now have the time to look at their health and the way they want to choose to live, and maybe look at the bigger picture with the environment and that. So it's a pretty fabulous time to be vegan, even though obviously nobody could ever say it's a fabulous time for life on Earth.
Well, it definitely is a fabulous time to be vegan. It's a fabulous time for vegans to say, see, everybody should have jumped on the bandwagon a little bit earlier, but it is what it is, and we're making strides together. The only thing now you need to figure out is how to get that delicious New York City food into everybody's home across the globe while they're taking your course.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing with the food, because I feel like I'm just not a foodie vegan. I mean, I like food, but it's not, cuisine is not my motivator. And yet I have to really remind myself that for a lot of people it is. And so that's just, one more thing to open up to and use recipes. And one thing I do like that's so much fun, that obviously is just something that we've had in the last 10 or 15 years, is I look in my kitchen, what's in there? And I Google butternut squash, garbanzo beans, broccoli. And all these great recipes show up that use those things. So trying to get a little bit more excited about the food, because I know that is one of the wonderful ways to draw people in.
It definitely is. And you were talking earlier about people looking into health and trying to look at it from a different perspective. And I know that you've been thinking about whole person health in a much different way. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I've become extremely interested in the ancient Indian health system of Ayurveda. Now, I actually started reading about it in the 90s. I went to a place out in Iowa, the Raj, for something called Panchakarma, which is an interesting Ayurvedic kind of cleansing and very indulgent, because it's full of massages, retreat experience. But I never really committed to this as a way of life, because I just didn't feel the need to do anything that I wasn't already doing. But in Ayurveda, they talk about three body types, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, and many people are two predominant. And I'm predominantly Vata, but as one moves forward in life, everybody becomes more Vata. And what that means is that things that we think are part of maturing and old age start to show up. So there's dryness, dry skin, and dry eyes. There's sluggish digestion, constipation, just difficulty digesting foods that you used to digest with impunity. And also with Vata, there's more of a tendency when things go wrong, instead of getting like riled up and angry, maybe like we do more in midlife or earlier life, it's more fear, more of a tendency toward anxiety. So it's not the kind of thing that you want to be living with. And I was noticing some of these things coming up in my life, and I spoke with a wonderful Ayurvedic mentor. I had taken a course in Ayurveda in 2016. And he got me changing some things in my life, a little bit about food, a lot about daily routine, and getting up early, going to bed early, doing things on time. And I thought, when you raise children, everybody says kids really need a schedule. You get a puppy. Puppy needs a schedule. But we somehow have this idea, they need a schedule, I don't need a schedule. But it's just made such a difference. So I've taken more courses, and certainly not an expert, but definitely an aficionado, and am really loving what's happening in my life.
I really like that, and I can think about times where I've asked clients, what is your bedtime routine? And they laugh and they're like, bedtime routine? I'm like, yeah. Did you have a bedtime routine for your children when they were 3 months old, when they were 6 months old, when they were 2 months old? Of course. So what's your bedtime routine? I don't know. I get in bed with my phone and then I turn it off when I'm too tired to keep my eyes open anymore. And I'm like, okay, so we need to take a step backwards, and we need to prepare the body for all of these rituals that we have throughout the day. So sleep, for example, smelling something. So the smell of your toothpaste, or getting a face wash that smells good, or lavender going in the bathroom while you're getting ready for bed, some kind of water, something you could touch, something you could feel, some kind of prayer or statement. It doesn't have to be spiritual or religious, just something that tells your body, ding, it's time. So that is so important. So I definitely hear what you're saying.
Absolutely. And according to Ayurveda, just what you're saying, the day starts the night before. And so if you're saying, I got up on the wrong side of the bed, it's like, no, maybe you went to bed on the wrong side of the bed. So there's also the idea that nature has cycles, just like we know there are seasons of the year, that there are kind of seasons of the day, and there are times when different energies are predominant. So if you can get to bed by 10 o'clock, nature is going to help you fall asleep, because there's sleepy energies happening then. But if you stay up 11, 12, 1, and people say, I got second wind, well, Ayurveda would say, no, you didn't. You just went into this next phase. And so if you can take advantage, and I know my grandmother used to say, the sleep you get before midnight is the best sleep. And I used to think, you know, you don't know anything, sleep is sleep. But Ayurveda agrees with my grandmother and says that that sleep before 12 o'clock is really when the detoxification is happening. And then also not to eat right before bed. If we can get the digestion process taken care of, then when we go to bed, the body can do the detox process through the night, and we wake up alert and ready to go and sparkly eyes. It's almost like there's two kinds of people in the world. The ones who say, oh, it's morning, it's wonderful, I'm so fresh, I'm so happy, and other people that like, don't look at me till I've had at least 2 cups of coffee. And if you look at how they were spending their evening time before they went to bed, you know, we might find some differences.
Do you think that principle, that routine, that bedtime is the same as for people our age as it is for younger people? Because I know the younger people, high school students, our kids, they like to stay up later and they seem to have tons of energy, but like we're in bed, 9 o'clock, and our kids are still bouncing off the wall.
Yeah, obviously in youth, we have all of this extra vitality. And so it's a good idea to follow these principles all throughout life. And it's almost like putting money in a savings account. When you're very young, the idea of saving for retirement is like, that's never going to happen to me. And it's a little bit the same with health. It's like, what? I feel great. Everything's fine. I never get sick, you know? And so it would be wonderful if everybody got to bed early, got up early, had some quiet time, did their exercise, you know. But when you're young, you can get by with skipping most of it, skipping all of it for years at a time. But eventually it kind of catches up and you start to see, wow, should have done that then, but I'll do it now. And I can say from, you know, the later end of life, there comes a point when it's absolutely essential, when it's either I do this, I prioritize my health, or I go the way of the standard American, which means the last 10, 15, 20 years of life is very inhibited. You know, you're either sick or you're sort of sick or you can't get around, or there's something not enlivening and vital about life. And my goal is to be alive and vital as long as I'm here. And I realize this is Earth and, you know, I'm not in charge and anything could happen, but I'm certainly going to work for that. And then if it doesn't happen, I can feel sad about it, but I don't have to feel guilty.
Absolutely. So these principles that you're talking about and that you're including, they, you know, coming from Ayurvedic, so coming from Indian culture and coming from your own culture yourself, how do people balance the spirituality life or following routines from another way of life when they've grown up with a specific religion or specific ways and traditions of their own already?
Well, I think this is something that we're all looking at as the world becomes smaller. And there talk about, you know, cultural appropriation and, you know, you want to watch out for that and, you know, this is not your culture. And yet, when I think of these ideas, so yoga came first. And it was interesting when India was colonized by England, Ayurveda was illegal. So the traditions were carried kind of underground, but the Ayurvedic hospitals were closed, the Ayurvedic medical schools, doctors could not practice Ayurveda during the time that England was in India. So the first yogi came from India, Swami Vivekananda, in 1893. He was invited to this incredible gathering in Chicago. It was part of the Chicago World's Fair that was called the World Parliament of Religions, and they still have that. I think it's every 2 years, perhaps annually. But anyway, 1893, the first yogi comes sharing these teachings which people who have gotten involved in yoga in the past 50 years here are somewhat familiar with. But at that time, it was absolutely new. It was absolutely revolutionary. Now, he didn't talk about Ayurveda because at that time, Ayurveda was illegal. But Ayurveda and yoga had grown up together so that yoga was really looking at the spiritual and Ayurveda was looking at the physical. So there's a little bit of overlap. And what I say about anything that anybody is looking into is you take what you like and leave the rest. If something gives you stress, say, I want to do this thing because I want to be healthier and I want to feel better, but oh my gosh, there's this part of it that just makes me really stressed and nervous. Well, that's not going to help you be healthier and feel better. So just, leave that. I love the idea of the back burner because some of the best food I've ever had in my life has come from a back burner. You put a soup over there, a nice slow cooked stew, and you turn it down really low and you let it stay all day. Maybe, pasta sauce, my mom's spaghetti sauce, she cooked like that. And so that's what we can do with these ideas. Today, it seems weird, foreign, I'm uncomfortable with it, I don't like that. Stick it on a back burner. Maybe you'll never look into it. You don't need to. But maybe over time, you'll see that there's something in that pot for you.
Yes, and sometimes the hardest part is when the pot comes ready to boil and you're ready to eat, it's not necessarily your own ideas about it, but it's how your family and friends might be looking in. So, you're Christian, you're Catholic, you're Jewish, but you're taking your yoga practice to a more spiritual level instead of just a physical level. Is it sacrilegious, right?
Yeah. Well, that may come from the outside. Interestingly enough, it doesn't come from the yoga side because the yoga tradition has always been that all religions are to guide people home. And that if you really follow the tenets of your own faith, that's going to get you there. You don't really need to go over here and also pick up yoga, but it doesn't hurt anything if you do. And I think the other thing that I've learned from yoga and from really being in this kind of spiritual world my whole life, I've always been fascinated by the big picture. I got my college degree in comparative religions, and I remember putting in the margins of all the books. Well, they said this in Taoism. They said that in Judaism, but it's over here in this other thing too, which is very cool to me. And it's this wonderful way of knowing that life has meaning and that we're connected. And in all traditions, there are people who get more comfort and support from the rules and from some of the outer teachings. And then there are people who are more of a mystical bent, and they're more nourished from the inner teachings. And sometimes the people with this inner leaning can just communicate so easily with somebody from an entirely different culture who also has that inner leaning. So, you figure it out. It's kind of like when you change your diet, and your mom thinks that, you've completely...
You're going to die of protein deficiency.
Eating certain foods, but it tends to work out over time.
It does. And I think taking the time to learn about it can help too. So for example, before COVID, I was teaching a lot of kids yoga, and I wasn't saying namaste at the end of my classes for a couple of reasons. But one of the main reasons is that people think that it is a religious saying, that it's religious to bring your hands there and to say namaste, when it actually isn't. It's a compliment. It's a way to communicate with people. And we would say peace, love, and have a nice day instead of namaste. I find it, more kid friendly, but also I didn't want to get into that whole conversation with parents who would have been uncomfortable with their kids saying it when the parents didn't quite understand it.
Right. Well, you brought up, so many things for me when you just said that. The first one is the putting the hands together. My sense is that after COVID, the whole shaking hands thing is going to be terribly passe. And I know people are doing the bump, and that's cool, but I think this putting the hands together is very cool. Then you talked about children doing yoga, and there is an incredible gentleman named Jeremy Gray in Alabama. Are you familiar with him?
I'm not, no.
You may want to invite him onto your podcast. He is a state representative in Alabama. He's a vegan, he's an athlete, he's a yogi, and one of his big jobs as he is going into this new year as a representative is to get off the books a law that was passed in the early 1990s in Alabama banning the teaching of yoga in the public schools. So very cool guy. And then the third thing that I want to respond to what you just said, because there was so much there, is just a little namaste story. My daughter and I were in Nepal when she was about 10 years old. And in Nepal, namaste is like hello, goodbye. It's just what people say. But it also has this other meaning of I behold the divine within you. So we were staying in a small town in Nepal, and they didn't have anything going on there. There was people didn't have television, radio, movies, anything like that. And in our hotel, they had this, they called it American Plan Breakfast, which means that everybody got this big breakfast, whether you wanted it or not. And an omelet came with the breakfast. And being vegan, of course, we didn't want that. But there were lots of stray dogs there that were very thin and needy. And one in particular, who had babies somewhere, you could tell, had befriended my daughter. So my daughter would put the omelet in the shower cap, and every morning she'd go down to the courtyard. The dog would be there. She'd feed the dog the omelet. And a few people noticed, and every day more people were there to see this thing happen. And by the end of the week, there were about 60 people gathered to see this performance of my daughter feeding an omelet to a dog. And knowing that it was our last day and I may never be there again, I really looked at people and looked at their faces to see what seemed to be going on. Some of them seemed just completely perplexed, like, wait a minute, that's food and that's a dog and that makes no sense. And others, I'm sure, were thinking, here's this privileged kid from the West taking this valuable food and feeding it to a dog. And then I noticed that the crowd parted, and this extremely elderly woman came through. She was very bent and didn't have an easy time getting to the front of the crowd. But when she got there and she saw what my daughter was doing, she smiled and her face just lit up. She had no teeth, but she didn't need them. And she put her hands together and started bowing to my little girl and saying, namaste, namaste, namaste. And I knew that in that case, she wasn't saying hello, goodbye. She was saying, I behold the divine within you. And then my daughter kind of, wiped the grease on her sweatshirt, and she turned to this woman, put her hands together and bowed and said, namaste. That was one of the most powerful experiences of my life, because in this tremendous gap of culture, language, age, they had communicated so perfectly and shared the conviction that whenever you are giving from your heart, regardless of who the recipient is, that is showing the divine within. So, when you talked about namaste, I just had to tell you that.
That's a great story.
That is
Absolutely.
a
Great
beautiful
message.
story, and it makes me almost want to go back and wish I would have said namaste, but there is a cuteness with these little 2-year-olds to the peace, love, and have a nice day too. But it's teaching them to take the time to look at other people and to take the time to be in the moment, and and of course not have the wrath of the parents who think that I'm teaching a different form of spirituality.
But I do think that a lot of people shy away from it because of the religious aspect potentially,
right?
And they're afraid of getting involved in yogic practice or an Ayurveda because it might be some kind of religion that they're not a part of. But we want people to engage in these activities to help raise their vibration and become more peaceful within. I don't know, maybe there's specific activities or ideas that we could share with our audience in how to help people get to that level without looking at it from a religious perspective.
I think if we look at any of the practices that we just think are normal and American or Western, many of them came from other places. So, you think about Joseph Pilates, was from somewhere in Eastern Europe. I don't know exactly where, maybe you do. Even calisthenics, I think largely grew up in Russia. And so there's always been this exchange. And for me, the amazing thing right now, you can get online and talk to somebody halfway around the world. It's almost as if we've evolved to a point where the wisdom of the world is available to everybody. And obviously not everybody is going to take every part of it because we don't have that much space in our brains or time in the day. But when you have an attraction to an idea, I think that we're no longer constrained by, but wait a minute, this isn't the way your grandparents did it. I think it's okay.
And that gets me asking, and a question that I'd like to ask is, when yoga comes from a place of compassion and a place of being kind to others, how is it that the yoga world and the vegan world isn't more connected? How is it that there are so many yogis out there who are doing so much from their heart, but are still taking part in the animal agriculture industry?
Yes. Well, if I have anything to say about it, this is really a great push in my life right now. I'm not sure when this will air, but on March 20th, there will be, or was, I don't know which, an event that is a gathering of the Integral Yoga Institute in New York City that's been around since 1970. Yoga is Vegan, an organization founded by Holly Scotus and my Main Street Vegan Academy. And this day, this conference is going to be called Yoga Goes Vegan. And interestingly enough, March 20th is Meat Out Day, and they've been doing Meat Out. They used to call it Great American Meat Out, and then there was something called Great American Smoke Out, and they said you can't do the Great American anymore, but anyway, it's still Meat Out. And it just happens that we're doing it that day because there needs to be a day, kind of like Earth Day. Everybody knows when they had the first Earth Day, and we recently did the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. Well, we'd like to think of this as Yoga Goes Vegan Day, because that concept of ahimsa, of reverence for life, of non-harming, really grew out of yogic teachings. And the advice to be vegetarian, and in yogic terms, vegetarian has always meant no meat, no fish, no eggs, has been around as long as yoga has been around. So that part is just hardwired in yogic teachings. Now, dairy is something else again. There's a great cultural connection in India to dairy. Krishna, who's highly regarded as an avatar, as a messiah in the Hindu faith, supposedly loved butter. And so it's difficult to separate some of these cultural and heritage things. So what we've ended up with in the US is we have this yoga world, this yoga culture that's a lot about Lululemon and how contorted a person can put himself or herself on Instagram and how many followers they can get. And a lot of these folks, certainly not all, there are some wonderful vegetarian and vegan people who have become very well known and popular in the yoga world, but there are also lots who just say, the vegetarian thing, that's just old. You don't need to do that. Or I had one say to me once, well, now that there's, humane meat that you can get from these small farms, we don't have to be vegetarian anymore. And my heart just sank. So what I hope to do is join with other people in this tradition who really do see that it is all connected, that yoga was so instrumental in getting vegetarianism to the West, that now if the West can return the favor by getting veganism more into that culture, then it's just going to be a wonderful, wonderful blending.
It will be. It'll be a much better world, not just for the animals, but for the actual environment as well. So I think that that's super important. We had scheduled this for March 23rd. So I think Adam's going to do a little bit of magic and he's going to try to get it out there for everybody a week or two in advance. But what we'd like from all the listeners is if they have their yogi friends who aren't quite on the plant-based or vegan wagon yet, that they let them know about that event and share this episode with them so that it can maybe bring them a little bit closer.
Oh, thank you. And Adam, thank you for doing that.
So
he's like, you're welcome.
I'll get that done. So where would people go to be able to get information for that?
They can go to my website, mainstreetvegan.net, and just click on events. And that will take them to the page to get more information and sign up.
Perfect. And we're going to link to that in our show notes at planttrainers.com. If anybody wanted to learn more about you, is there anywhere else that you'd like them to go, or would you like them to go there?
Oh, that's as good place as any. And I'm Main Street Vegan everywhere, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. So hope to see people online.
Victoria, it's always so nice to listen to your voice. It's such a soothing and calming voice. That's why I don't talk very much when we have these conversations. I just like to listen. But there's so many valuable points and great information that you've shared. Thank you so much for being here on the Plant Trainers podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. All the best.
Namaste and have a nice day.